You're looking here at the first mainstream family car developed from scratch around both conventional combustion and plug-in hybrid power. Few expected Mitsubishi to be first to market with such a thing, but with this third generation Outlander crossover model, the brand has stolen a march on many of its rivals. It can seat 7, take you properly off-road, and even make its own kind of eco-statement. You can't ask much more from family transport than that. Haven't family cars come a long way? Look at this one, Mitsubishi's third generation Outlander. It can carry 7 and conquer the lower slopes of Ben Nevis whilst delivering the kind of running cost returns that you'd expect from an ordinary family estate. It's a crossover with a conscience and a mission. Which is to show just how technologically far ahead of its competitors Mitsubishi is, something emphasised in no uncertain terms by the top PHEV petrol-electric plug-in hybrid version, with headline fuel economy and CO2 figures to embarrass the cheapest, most frugal city car. Did we ever believe we'd really see an SUV-styled four-wheel drive family car green enough to gain its owners a place on the Friends of the Earth Christmas card list? Well, it's a reality with this Outlander. Though not with this particular model. The priciest PHEV flagship variant may garner all the headlines, but when it comes down to it, the vast majority of potential Outlander customers will prefer to stick to something a little more conventional and a lot more affordable, namely the 2.2 litre diesel engine that every other variant in the range gets, the power plant fitted to the version that we're going to look at here, launched in the UK early in 2013. Its predecessor shared its design with badge-engineered Peugeot and Citroën rivals, but this car is all Mitsubishi's own, with sleeker looks, more frugal running costs and plenty of extra state-of-the-art technology. If you were considering, say, a soft-roading CR-V or RAV4, but want something more spacious and versatile, and a little more forward-thinking than bigger 7-seat Kia or Hyundai crossover models, then this is probably a car you need to look at in detail, which is exactly what we're going to do here. If you're of the opinion that many 4x4s have just become estate cars with a little more ground clearance and a largely redundant all-wheel drive system, you might well like this Outlander. Despite its modern styling, there's something quite old school in the way that it drives, and I mean that as a compliment. Set off down the road and the feeling that you get is that of being in a proper 4x4 rather than some sort of ineffectual crossover vehicle. You sense the meatiness of the steering and the gutsiness of the diesel engine and realise that this is a vehicle you'll be able to rely on, a car that'll work with you, even in a tight spot. I'm talking here of the conventional 2.2 litre diesel version that almost all Outlander customers will choose. Driving the petrol-electric PHEV plug-in hybrid variant is of course quite a different experience. We'll get to that in a minute. First, to the issue that, on paper at least, might initially strike you with this diesel, a perceived lack of power. This car's most obvious Kia Sorento and Hyundai Santa Fe rivals offer 194 PS, cars that the previous generation Outlander struggled to match with 177 PS on tap. So how will this generation model cope then with a more modest 150 PS under the bonnet of every single conventional derivative? Pretty well, as it happens. In fact, if anything, it feels a little more rapid than its predecessor because torque, pulling power, has stayed the same at 380 Newton meters, yet weight has fallen by a useful 100 kilograms. That degree of grunt means this car is rated to tow 2 tons on a brake trailer, significantly more than a comparable Toyota RAV4 or Honda CR-V. This, of course, matters far more than the rest to 62 mph sprint time, but for the record, that's 10.2 seconds, only a fraction behind the Kia and Hyundai models that I just mentioned. And it progresses on the way to a maximum speed that's actually higher at 124 miles an hour. Power isn't the only area where, on paper, this generation Outlander might seem to have taken a step backwards, only to prove its point when out on the road. It's the same when it comes to the automatic gearbox many buyers will want. Now, the old version of this car was one of the first models of its kind to feature newfangled twin-clutch auto transmission technology, clever enough to pre-select the next gear before you've even left the last one. Yet for this Mark III version of this Mitsubishi, that's been ditched for the more conventional Invex 2 auto box the Japanese brand still had on the shelf. Why? Because it turned out that going that route offered a smoother change with cleaner emissions. The figures and the driving experience both bear that out. I think an automatic gearbox actually suits this car rather well. Firstly, because I love the lovely tactile wheel-mounted paddle shifters that Mitsubishi has borrowed for the Outlander from its Evo 10 Rally replica supercar, but mainly because of the kind of diesel engine this is, tuned to develop its pulling power low down in the rev range to help with towing and off-roading. As a result, if you choose the 6-speed manual version, you'll be grabbing for gears pretty quickly as you accelerate onto roundabouts and such like. In this auto model, everything's far more relaxed. Maybe too relaxed, in fact. The 62 mile an hour sprint time falls by 1.5 seconds with the auto box, and you feel the difference when darting for a gap or when coming out of junctions. But then, this isn't supposed to be a sporting crossover or a real rival to more agile compact 4x4s. Buy a Ford Kuga or a Toyota RAV4 if that's what you want. Both will better the rather vague steering response on offer here that's rather at odds with the sporting feel that you get sat stationary grasping the smallish, chunky leather-trimmed wheel and flicking on those Ferrari-style metallic paddle shifters. Mitsubishi's greater development emphasis has been on things more likely to matter to Outlander folk. Better ride quality, a box that's been ticked even with the large 18-inch wheels on the car that I'm trying here, and extra refinement delivered thanks to things like more sophisticated engine mounts, thicker glass, and improved sound insulation materials. Doubtless Mitsubishi could have improved the handling of this car if it had included the kind of off-road compromises found in most of its crossover rivals. Refreshingly though, the brand has stuck to its guns and its heritage in this respect, as a result of which this Outlander now has a bit more Shogun in its genes. I'd certainly much rather be towing or tackling a rutted, muddy track in this car than in most of its rivals, Land Rover and Jeep excepted. True, more rugged tyres would make this a more capable off-roader, but for a 4x4 with independent suspension all round, wheel articulation is miles better than most cars in this segment. Hill start assist and a 22.5 degree approach angle get you going up steep slopes, and there's the same 22.5 degree departure angle to get you down them again, though as you're slithering towards the bottom you'll possibly regret Mitsubishi's decision not to bother with the fitment of hill descent control on this car. That, the restricted 21 degree breakover angle and the lack of underbody protection might dissuade some owners from venturing too far off the beaten track, though the 190mm ground clearance figure is a lot better than most feebly capable crossovers can offer. As for the four-wheel drive system activated via this push button below the gear stick, well, the first point I need to make is that in a break with the current fashion in this segment, you have to have it, at least in Britain. Indeed, even the plug-in hybrid variant of this car is all-wheel driven. Other rivals offer two-wheel drive drivetrain options for those wanting to get their running costs down, but Mitsubishi hopes to have covered that here by including a four-wheel drive eco mode that powers the car through the front wheels nearly all the time anyway, only sending drive to the rear when a loss of traction is sensed. Which is why a four-wheel drive Outlander can return superior fuel and CO2 figures to two-wheel drive versions of Kia's Sorento and Land Rover's Freelander. Point proved, I'd say. In fact, I can't really see why you'd ever bother to switch to the second 4x4 setting, 4-wheel drive auto, a mode which duplicates much of the same functionality but operates the car less economically. That only leaves the final 4-wheel drive lock mode you'll only need if your Outlander ends up somewhere you really shouldn't have ventured with it in the first place. Here, the electronically operated clutch pack splits drive 50-50 between the front and rear axles to deliver all the grip you're going to get. And finally, well, I promised to tell you a little about the PHEV plug-in hybrid variant, which offers a 2-litre petrol engine aided by a 70 kilowatt generator and a couple of 80 brake horsepower electric motors, one at the front, one at the rear, giving all-wheel drive and a combined power output in the region of 220 brake horsepower. It's quite a remarkable vehicle, which most of the time will operate under battery power alone across its 3 driving modes. The first of these, Pure EV, sees full silent milk float mobility across a range of just over 30 miles, during which time the car will be driven by its 2 electric motors with drive supplied from the battery pack. Should the need arise for sudden acceleration or the battery charge have run down, the car will seamlessly switch to its second series hybrid driving mode. Here your forward motion will still be battery driven, but the generator will start up to power the battery and the motors. If that's still not enough for either the performance or the driving range that you need, the car will finally, almost reluctantly, switch to its third parallel hybrid driving mode, which adds the resources of the petrol engine driving the front wheels, in which form the car will spirit you from rest to 62 miles an hour in about 11 seconds. In this mode you have a driving range claimed at 547 miles. If you're on a long journey that'll finish with a bit of urban driving, there's a useful feature that enables you to hold the battery charge and use the zero emission stuff more effectively around town at the end of the trip. Plus, there's a neat feature that allows you to use the petrol engine to replenish the battery's charge up to 70% as you drive. It's all very clever. Mitsubishi's design team had plenty of time to come up with this third generation Outlander's rather distinctive shape. At launch, this was the first all-new model the brand had produced in nearly 3 years. It's a softer, less overtly SUV-style look that marks a fresh aesthetic direction for the brand, with high flanks, a raised beltline, uncluttered surfaces, strong shouldering, and soft-contoured bumpers. It's quite slippery too for something you might expect to be boxy and bluff. The 0.33 CD drag factor sleeker than that of a Nissan Micra. I'm also impressed by the way the styling artfully disguises the size of this car, though the tape measure actually suggests it to be a little more compact than you might think. This vehicle's footprint is, after all, no bigger than that of a Ford Focus. Up front, the slim aerodynamic grille is trimmed with unusual hockey stick shaped chromed strips and flanked by sculpted wraparound headlamps. Moving to the back, horizontal trim between the rear lamps is supposed to add visual width and give the car a more planted stance. A little disappointingly, it's a one-piece tailgate rather than the split folding affair found on the previous generation model. Perhaps because Mitsubishi wanted to follow the current fashion of providing optional power operation, which I'm sure they'd want me to show off here. A pity that it opens slower than your father-in-law's wallet. Once raised, you'll find revealed a luggage space that's necessarily very small if all 3 seating rows are in use, just 128 litres, though you do get this underfloor compartment where you can put the tonneau cover. Fold these separate third row chairs into the floor though, and you get a 950mm long load space with a useful 591 litre total capacity that pretty much applies even if you opt for the PHEV plug-in hybrid version. Less impressive is the extended capacity with both rear seating rows folded. Though the 1.69 metre floor length this creates is 335mm more than the previous generation model, the 1022 litre total load capacity figure lags some way behind obvious rivals. Still, it'll probably be sufficient for most owners. And at the wheel,
Well, efforts have clearly been made to give the cabin a bit of a lift over the plasticky utilitarian feel that characterised the old model. This is, after all, the first Outlander and arguably the first Mitsubishi to get soft touch interior plastics. But they're not as evident as they would be in, say, Volkswagen Tiguan, nor does the build, fit and finish feel as bulletproof. Which is a pity, because in all the customer satisfaction surveys going, the evidence says that it is, and that an Outlander will offer a far better long-term ownership proposition. I guess it all comes down to subjective perceived quality. If this Japanese manufacturer can just up that a few more notches in its products, then the German brands really would have something to worry about, because in terms of technology, space and structural integrity, this car's otherwise right on the money. Everything's certainly easy to use, though some of the big chunky buttons are a little hard to find, and the sat-nav and stereo can be fiddly to operate. There's a lovely 3-spoke leather trimmed wheel that adjusts for both reach and for rake, and through which you glimpse a well-designed instrument binnacle with 2 big dials and a nice old school fuel bar graph. There's a selection of eco driving displays too, though some might be seen to be a touch gimmicky. Moving back into the second row, there's reasonable space for 2 adults or 3 at a squash, though taller folk may feel the need to recline back the adjustable backrests. The main news here is the greater flexibility that you get thanks to the way that the bench can slide backwards and forwards by as much as 250 millimetres. That's a range 3 times greater than that of the old car, which certainly helps make the third row seating more usable, where fitted of course. You can only have 2 rows in the PHEV hybrid model, which is a pity. This seemingly the only area of practicality that was compromised by the battery installation. Assuming that, like most Outlander owners, you have chosen a model in which seating is possible in the luggage compartment, you access the rearmost section of the car via this sliding walk-in function and head in to find that instead of the Mark II Outlander's uncomfortable fixed bench, there are now 2 separate properly sprung seats with integral head restraints and reclining backrests. They're still only really meant for children though, or adults who you don't like very much, but at least there's the feeling that this Mitsubishi is now a proper 7-seater rather than crossover with a couple of midget chairs parked in the boot. Prices for this conventional diesel Outlander model start at just under £25,000, but you can pay up to around £34,000 for one in top-spec GX5 guise with an automatic gearbox, a car like the version that I have here. And that's only just below the kind of money you'll need to find for the clever petrol-electric PHEV plug-in hybrid variant, a model that at present is pretty much unique in the family crossover marketplace. As for choice across the Outlander lineup as a whole, well, at first glance there's plenty, with 4 trim levels and even a 4-work commercial vehicle version at the foot of the range. Look a little closer though, and there are limitations. For a start, at the launch of this car, Mitsubishi's UK importers for some reason chose not to import the frugal 2-wheel drive variant that you can buy in Europe, so it's a 4-wheel drive only selection. And for most buyers, a 7-seater only body style too. Though you can have a 5-seat only layout, only the base trimmed GX2 variant offers it. That and the top PHEV plug-in hybrid petrol-electric model, which doesn't have room for the extra chairs and a boot crammed with underfloor electronics. All of which means that most folk will want to limit their Outlander interest to this conventional diesel version and start their search at the GX3 trim level, which will mean a price point of just under £27,000. Yes, that's around £2,700 more than the base GX2 variant, but the extra cash does buy the 7-seat capacity and extra equipment items like Bluetooth phone compatibility, roof rails, alloy wheels and fog lamps, things that the majority of them will want. You don't get the option of automatic transmission at this level though. For that, you've to find more cash for the plush GX4 variant, where there's the £1,400 option of the Invex 2 6-speed auto gearbox that's standard on this priciest GX5 range topper. As for the eco-minded PHEV Outlander plug-in hybrid model, well, that's very good value, priced identically to a mid-range GX3 auto version of the conventional diesel, so leaving you plenty of change from a £30,000 budget. Though if you opt for a plusher trim level, you could easily find yourself spending somewhere in the £30,000 to £35,000 bracket on one. That's the kind of cash many would look to shell out on a conventional diesel version of a prestigious compact SUV like an Audi Q5 or a BMW X3, and it isn't far away from the cost of a fully loaded RAV4 or CR-V. Yet an Outlander PHEV would cost you much, much less to run than any of those cars. Viewed in that light, this futuristic Mitsubishi with its tiny running costs is certainly worth a look. Most, though, as I've already said, will be limiting their interest to the conventional diesel version that I've got here. Now, as mentioned earlier, if you don't mind a basic kit tally and being limited to a bottom of the range model, you can get it in 5-seat only guise, in which form it might in theory be seen as a competitor for mainstream soft roaders like Toyota's RAV4, Land Rover's Freelander and Honda's CR-V. And if you see the car in that way, you'll see it as a value option against directly comparable diesel four-wheel drive versions of the three cars that I've just mentioned. After all, such an entry-level Outlander GX2 would save you around £1,000 on a comparable Freelander, around £1,500 on a comparable CR-V, and around £2,000 on a comparable RAV4. In reality though, the vast majority of people buying this Mitsubishi will want the 7-seat capacity that's lacking not only in ordinary soft roaders like the ones I've just mentioned, but also in conventional crossovers like Nissan's Qashqai and Peugeot's 3008. Once upon a time, to go off-road and seat 7 without winning the lottery, buyers would have had to stretch up to fully fledged clunky large SUVs like Land Rover's Discovery, Toyota's Land Cruiser and Mitsubishi's own Shogun. These can be pricey though, which is why a whole series of slightly more compact family 4x4 crossover models have sprung up, campaigning in the £25,000 to £30,000 bracket to satisfy buyers looking for 7 seats, SUV styling and a modicum of mud plugging prowess. With the exception of Nissan's X-Trail, which is worth a look, these are mostly Korean, the demise of Chevrolet's Captiva, leaving just 3 main choices. If you simply want the most metal for your money, SsangYong's Rexton W provides it, but it's ponderous to drive and much of the relatively small saving that you'll make over this Outlander will be swallowed up in that car's higher running costs and lower residuals. All of which will leave most potential customers for this Mitsubishi actually narrowing down to just 2 alternatives, Kia's Sorento and Hyundai's Santa Fe. Now the Hyundai looks appealing, but in volume 7-seat manual gearbox form costs a couple of thousand more than a directly comparable Outlander. Quite a big premium in this part of the market. That leaves the Sorento as the closest option to this car. Very similarly priced, but not as technically advanced and a bit plainer to look at. All of which might well mean that once you've weighed up all the pros and cons, it is indeed this Mitsubishi that'll prove the best fit for you, your budget and the needs of your family. In terms of equipment, all models get the basics you'd expect, like air conditioning, cruise control, power windows and mirrors, automatic lighting that also stays on to guide you to your front door at night, a decent quality 6-speaker stereo with USB compatibility, a speed limiter and hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. I've already talked about the extra niceties Mitsubishi throws in on top of that for all 7-seat models, but you'll need to be shopping right near the top of the range if you want things like powered leather seats, satellite navigation, an electric sunroof, a rear parking camera or a powered tailgate. Delve into the options list and you'll find the usual personalisation options, things like side sill extensions, all manner of roof racks and carrying systems, cosmetic corner extensions for the front and rear bumpers, parking sensors and the usual mats and flap sets. But these are details. On most trim levels, much of what you'll really need and want comes as standard, helping to keep costs down nicely. When it comes to safety, Mitsubishi is especially proud of its RISE, or Reinforced Impact Safety Evolution system, which aims to disperse energy loads during side and rear crashes and controls distortion, enhances occupant protection and also helps to protect the fuel system in the event of a rear impact. In addition, there's all the more conventional stuff too. So every variant gets ISOFIX child seat fastenings, a pedestrian-friendly front bonnet and a pedestrian-friendly bumper too, plus twin front, side and curtain airbags and a driver's knee bag. There's also the expected electronic assistance, stability control and Mitsubishi's very effective MAS RIC traction system. Plus, if you stamp on the anti-lock brakes in an emergency, the hazard warning lights are automatically activated to warn following motorists. It all helps to explain this car's 5-star Euro NCAP rating in independent tests, in which this car achieved a perfect 100% score in the active safety category. That'll be reassuring for potential family buyers. Inevitably, perhaps the really high-tech safety stuff is reserved for the flagship model that I'm trying here. This includes things like super wide xenon HID headlights that are 1.4 times more powerful than standard ones for easier nighttime driving. Then there's an ACC adaptive cruise control system that automatically keeps you a safe distance behind the car in front on the highway. An LDW lane departure warning system that stops dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the motorway. And cleverest of all, perhaps, an FCW forward collision warning system that uses a radar mounted in the front grille to scan the road ahead for potential collision hazards as you drive. If one is detected and you don't respond or aren't able to, the system will automatically apply the brakes to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. It could make the difference between a narrow squeak and a really bad day. There's a simple reason why Mitsubishi reduced the output of its 2.2 litre DID diesel engine for this generation version, namely to bring running costs into line with the impressive frugality now expected amongst the class leaders in the developing crossover segment. That required more than a power tweak, of course. Over 100 kilograms of weight has been trimmed away in the creation of this Mark III model, resulting in a total curb weight less than that of a compact car like, say, BMW's 1 Series. And a stop-start system has been added to cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. As a result, assuming you press this dash-mounted eco button to keep the car front driven most of the time, emissions improved from 160 on the old model to 140 grams per kilometre, with a combined cycle fuel showing of 52.3 miles to the gallon. And you can even do a fraction better than that in the slightly lighter entry-level 5-seat version. The automatic model manages 48.7 miles to the gallon and 153 grams per kilometre. Either way, you're looking at returns that are about 10% better than those of a directly comparable Kia Sorento or Hyundai Santa Fe. This car stacks up better than a comparable diesel 4-wheel drive Toyota RAV4 or Honda CR-V on the balance sheet too. A manual diesel Outlander is tax rated in VED Band E, the same as a little 1.4 litre petrol Volkswagen Polo. It seems that intelligent motion is more than just a Mitsubishi marketing strapline. Surely though, brands like Honda and Toyota aren't going to be worked over when it comes to residual values. Think again, the Outlander walks all over them. After 3 years and 36,000 miles, independent industry experts reckon that the entry-level version of this Mitsubishi should retain just over 50% of its value. Comparing entry trim all-wheel drive diesel models, Toyota's RAV4 will retain just over 43% over the same 3-year period, with the Honda CR-V managing 42%, so it's not even close.
Factor in servicing, insurance and road tax, and the Outlander delivers 3-year running cost returns of 54.4 pence per mile. The CR-V 64.8 pence per mile and the RAV4 65.5 pence. It's a total slam dunk for Mitsubishi. So far I've assumed that you'll be buying the conventional 2.2 litre diesel version I've been trying here. But if you can stretch to and justify the 5-seat only configuration of the priciest PHEV petrol-electric hybrid plug-in variant, then the running cost numbers just get flat out bizarre. Although the official combined cycle fuel figure of 148 miles to the gallon merely serves to remind us that we have an urgent need for a new European fuel consumption test, in real world use you should see better than 54 miles to the gallon from it while driving in series hybrid mode with the 2-litre engine acting as a generator for the lithium-ion battery pack rather than driving the wheels. The hybrid Outlander can drive for over 32 miles on a full electric charge you'll complete in around 4 hours, unless you plugged into a fast charger, in which case you can top the battery up to 80% of its capacity in just half an hour. This means that some drivers will be able to pop the car on charge in the evening, do the commute, then bring it home without using any petrol at all. Mitsubishi reckons that if you cover more than 100 miles between charges, the conventional diesel version, like the car I'm driving here, is going to work out more cost effective. Those with a lower daily mileage commute, though, could well find that the numbers will decisively swing in favour of the PHEV variant, particularly if you take into account the savings that you'll make in BIK tax liability. It's just 5%, road fund licence and, if applicable, corporation tax and the London congestion charge. All those are aided by the astonishing official 44 grams per kilometre CO2 rating. All Outlanders are covered by a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty, and fixed price servicing is available if you choose the transferable Mitsubishi service plan when you buy the car, which will be useful for servicing as every 9,000 miles or 12 months. Insurance costing should be reasonably affordable for this 2.2 litre diesel, ranging between groups 22 and 24. For the PHEV plug-in hybrid, insurance groupings range between 24 and 27, and residual values are strong. Mitsubishi predicts 49% for a GX4H variant after 3 years and 30,000 miles. Over that period, the brand predicts that you'd also save substantially over the cost of premium diesel-powered automatic gearbox 4-wheel drive crossover rivals. Taking fuel for the period into account, they reckon you'd save around £12,500 over a BMW X3 xDrive, nearly £17,000 over the cost of running an Audi Q5 2-litre TDI, and nearly £18,000 over the cost of running a comparable Honda CR-V.
You can see why Mitsubishi didn't want to share this Outlander's design with other brands this time around. Some of the technology here is genuinely forward-thinking, even if you don't opt for a plug-in hybrid variant that sets new standards not only for crossovers of this kind, but also for family cars as a whole. Which is worth knowing, for if you're looking at a car of this kind, then this might not be the one you'd first think about. Despite the fact that in the case of the diesel version most will want, the running costs are low, the residuals are good, and equipment levels are well up to class standards. Other rivals might offer classier cabins or a slightly more dynamic drive, but they're often pricier, less versatile, and less effective when it comes to things like towing. Or driving on the mud. This car, after all, also feels a good deal more suited to light off-roading than the crossover competition, which is worth knowing if you and 6 others ever want to share a vehicle able to tackle the Rubicon Trail. That's not a realistic family aspiration, of course, but this car very definitely is. The kind of model the brand has long needed for style-conscious folk with kids and active lifestyles. It's unexpectedly clever, unexpectedly effective, unexpectedly Mitsubishi.